Welcome back to Special Report. It is time for our weekly Common Ground segment. Participating tonight, Kentucky Republican Congressman Andy Barr and New York Democratic Congressman Richie Torres. Congressman, thanks for talking with us. We had the breaking news today of this leaker arrested, a 21-year-old member of the Air National Guard. Congressman Torres, I'll start with you. Your thoughts about this, big picture, and what's your reaction to it?
Look, it goes without saying that nothing is more critical to the security of our nation than protecting the confidentiality of our secrets. And I'm just concerned about the security failures. You know, how could a 21-year-old National Guardsman so easily access and leak massive amounts of classified intelligence? So there should be an investigation into what went wrong, and Congress should act decisively to put in place whatever safeguards are required.
Yeah, here is former Vice President Mike Pence today. Take a listen.
I fall back on fundamental questions, and that is how could a Massachusetts National Guardsman have access to this type of classified and sensitive information, and how would they be able to release that information? There needs to be a full-scale review of who has access to this type of classified information and how it's being handled.
Congressman Barr, it sounds like you all have common ground here on this issue.
Absolutely. This is a betrayal of trust of our national security and our allies. And the damage that this could do in terms of the credibility of the efforts of the Ukrainians to wage their resistance against the Russians is at stake. Our national security is at stake. And we need to obviously hold accountable those responsible for this leak, protect the confidentiality and the classification of this information, obviously. And the way to do that going forward is to hold individuals accountable who are responsible for the leak.
Yeah, and we'll see and follow it from here. Congressman Torres, one of the reasons I brought you all together is the common ground you see on China. You're both on that select committee dealing with China. Here's the Washington Post saying Russia says China agreed to secretly provide weapons. Leaked documents show China approved provision of lethal aid to Russia in its war in Ukraine earlier this year and planned to disguise military equipment as civilian items, according to U.S. intercept of Russian intelligence revealed in the leaked secret documents. We've not seen evidence that China has transferred weapons or provided lethal assistance to Russia, but we remain concerned and are continuing to monitor closely, as senior administration officials said. This kind of links those two stories and the concern about China and that leak.
Look, these leaks serve as a reminder that that China represents the single greatest strategic challenge to the United States. You know, the fundamental question is, what kind of world do we wish to live in? Do we want to live in a free world governed by countries like the United States? Or do we wish to live in a totalitarian Orwellian police state like what you have in Xinjiang in China? And I suspect most people, especially most Americans, would prefer to err on the side of freedom and democracy.
Congressman Barr, what can you all do? You know, up on Congress, this select committee, what can you do? Can you force the hand of the administration in some way when it comes to China?
Beijing is engaged in a coordinated strategy to provide material support to Putin's illegal aggression against Ukraine. Not only is China purchasing oil and natural gas using the yuan to finance this war, but they're providing lethal support. Customs data supports that, shows that small arms and also drone parts and also aircraft parts are being sold and shipped to Russia from China. So this is a concerning development, and it requires a response from the Congress and from this administration, including secondary sanctions on those Chinese entities engaged in assisting Russia in its illegal war against Ukraine.
But Congressman Barr, so far the administration is saying they're not going down that road of sanctions, at least not yet.
This is not classified information. This is not only documented by various Western journalists and from customs data and trade records, but it's also from the administration itself. We passed a provision in the National Defense Authorization Act that required the Defense Department to report to Congress about material and lethal assistance from China to Russia, and they concluded as well that China was engaged in material support of Russia. So this axis that is developing between Moscow and Beijing is very troubling.
Congressman Torres, last thing, I had the French economic and finance minister on the show last night, and he pushed back against what is perceived to be this shift, and that maybe France is stepping back from Taiwan and maybe stepping toward China in some ways. Today, we have a report about Brazil's leader going over to China, Lula, and essentially calling on alternatives to replace the U.S. dollar in foreign trade, having conversations with China on that front. Are you seeing a shift here?
I think it's just painful to see any Western leader acquiesce itself to the CCP. But I think anyone who bets against the United States does so at its own peril. The fundamentals of American power remain much stronger than the fundamentals of China's economy. If you look at the fundamentals of China's economy, its productivity has collapsed in half in the 2010s. It has a demographic crisis that is so severe that the population is going to collapse in half by the end of the century. And so I'm confident that the United States is going to continue to be the leader of the free world if we do everything right, if we make the investments that we need to make in our military, in our economy, in our diplomacy, and in our technology.
It's really important, and some of the things you said, we don't hear a lot about China. It's often seen as this massive power, but it's got internal problems as well. All right, Congressman, thank you very much for the time.
Absolutely.